Board. Thank you all for being here today. We are here on National Human Trafficking Day to announce the release of the State Task Force Annual Human Trafficking Report and to talk about all of the great work that so many have contributed to this past year as it relates to public awareness about human trafficking and how we as the state can combat human trafficking. Human trafficking is a complex crime that infiltrates communities across South Carolina. Traffickers continue to target the vulnerable as well as those in mainstream society. It presents a public health and public safety issue that violates basic human rights. While traffickers continue to seek opportunities to exploit victims for profit, the South Carolina Human Trafficking Task Force works to prevent the crime, protect our communities, and prosecute those committing these heinous crimes. The State Task Force utilizes a strategic, multidisciplinary approach to combating human trafficking. The collaborative approach includes efforts from mandated and non-mandated state agencies, state and federal law enforcement, nonprofits, faith leaders, community volunteers, and professionals in numerous fields, including medicine, transportation, and hospitality. We strive to always include survivors' voices in the process to help provide insight into the development of trauma-informed, victim-centered protocols and support services. I would like to now invite First Lady Peggy McMaster to share on behalf of the Governor's Office some comments. Madam First Lady.
The Governor has proclaimed January as Human Trafficking Awareness Month in South Carolina. I want to thank all the members of the State Task Force for the hard work they do to battle human trafficking in our state. I hope to continue my part as a member to help bring awareness about this terrible crime and encourage more people to get involved. And I'm going to give this to Catherine Moorhead. This is the proclamation.
Thank you. Were you finished?
I'm through.
You're through? Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't want to cut you off. Thank you, Ms. Peggy. We appreciate your involvement, participation, and support of this organization. We appreciate the Governor's support of it as well. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge someone who is a good friend of mine I've known for many years. I would like to acknowledge Senator Katrina Shealy for all her support, as well as all of the members of the legislature who work in strengthening our state's human trafficking laws. I would like to also recognize Representative Russell Fry, who could not be here today, but has also been a leader along with Senator Katrina Shealy and being a champion for all of the efforts that we're doing throughout the state of South Carolina. So thank you and Representative Fry, and there are other legislators that are right there alongside of them, but we cannot do it without your support and help. We have been in recent years recognized nationally for the progress we've made in South Carolina. So we thank you, Senator Shealy, and others for your continued efforts. I think 2 or 3 years ago we were ranked #1 in the country based on legislation passed. So that, like I said, we couldn't do what we do if it wasn't for you. The Statewide Human Trafficking Task Force consists of both statutorily mandated members and appointed members, as well as organizations and individuals across the state who want to help in the fight against human trafficking. Our listserv now includes over 450 members on the task force. The task force began implementing a strategic response model to improve coordination amongst agencies and help ensure a rapid response to victim needs in communities across the state. 2020 also brought restructuring of the 12 task force subcommittees to adapt to better serving South Carolina through a new response model. Additionally, we are excited to announce the formation of the Task Force Advisory Council. The council is composed of subject matter experts from key focus areas critical to anti-human trafficking efforts. Those members include experts from the Department of Mental Health, DAODAS, you know it as the Department of Alcohol and Other Drug Abuse Services. We are excited to announce our new working relationships with Director Sarah Goldsby of DAODAS and Dr. Kenneth Rogers, Director of DMH. They are both present here today, standing over to my right, and I want to thank them publicly for your engagement on this very important issue, so thank you so much. These partnerships will help provide us the most evidence-based specialized services to victims as we are constantly struggling to meet the specific needs of those who have been victimized by human traffickers. We continue to work with communities across the state through 9 regional task force. Now, whereas the state task force deals with taking an international problem and a national problem and localizing it to the state of South Carolina, our regional task force helped the state task force localize our efforts to combat human trafficking and educate the public down to counties and communities in a more localized way. Those 9 regional task force are the Upstate Task Force, Foothills Task Force, Richland County has a task force, the 2nd Judicial Circuit, the Low Country Task Force, the Tri-County Task Force, the Coastal Task Force, the Catawba Area Task Force, and the newly launched 11th Circuit Task Force across the river, which we just launched in December. The PD region is the focus for the next regional task force, which we'll be doing this coming year in 2021. The state task force quickly adapted with the rest of the state to virtual meetings and trainings while monitoring the effect of COVID-19 pandemic on anti-human trafficking efforts and human trafficking victimization. The task force partnered with the University of South Carolina to study these effects on those providing direct services to victims. The most vulnerable populations in our state, including children, were a challenge to monitor because the number of people interacting with this population became smaller due to the quarantine and the effects of COVID-19 on our communities around the state. We are honored to have Director Mike Leach of the Department of Social Services to talk about how DSS has been responding to human trafficking within his department. Director Leach.
Thank you, Attorney General Wilson. Good morning. When the General Assembly revised the state's trafficking laws in 2018, the South Carolina Department of Social Services was identified as having a role in the care of victims of trafficking who are minors. Over the last 18 months, under this administration, DSS has moved quickly to improve the existing sex trafficking program by establishing standard operating procedures in a protocol, extending policies to include labor trafficking, and expanding the agency screening tool with specific guidance for referrals to child advocacy centers for forensic interviews. DSS has also implemented support structures to our frontline professionals at the county and regional levels, including training, technical assistance, and biweekly staffings to monitor a child or youth's treatment progress. Starting in 2020, DSS created a systemic approach to data collection to track each suspected trafficking case from point of entry at intake, through investigation, through placement and treatment. Also in 2020, DSS developed a comprehensive 5-module compulsory training for child welfare staff to complete over an extended time frame. I want to thank our state-level support staff, Gwen Goodlett, Nikki Brown, and Amanda Kuhn, our regional community liaison coordinators, and our well-being teams and performance coaches on assisting with this implementation and for continuously driving improvement in this work. I'd also like to thank Catherine Moorhead for working with us in making sure that we continue to have continuous quality improvement in this area. Like the rest of the nation, the number of child trafficking victims in South Carolina increased dramatically when the COVID pandemic hit the nation. Our data shows the number of child trafficking intakes from March 2020 to April 2020 increased from 14 to 25, or 178%. Specifically, experts continue to be worried that the economic effects of this virus will increase some of the vulnerabilities that make people susceptible to sex and labor trafficking in the first place: economic needs, unstable living conditions, and substance use issues, among other things. To continue our work in identifying and serving minors victims of trafficking in 2021, we plan to continue to develop staff capacity through continuous training and ongoing refinement of policies and procedures, expand placement and specialized treatment options for youth impacted by child trafficking through collaboration with national and state subject matter experts, expand support services for frontline staff, therapeutic foster parents and children and youth who are victims of child trafficking, Those placement options and service array are lacking in this area, and we have to continue to figure out how to make that work, including having the necessary funding to be able to do that. And we're going to heighten the communication and education efforts on the prevalence of labor trafficking happening in South Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Leach. Now, while the Department of Social Services continues to work with victims of abuse and neglect, I want to also recognize the hard work of the SLED agents assigned to work human trafficking cases around the state. They work with law enforcement throughout this state. I'd like to recognize today SLED Lieutenant Jade Roy, who is present down here to my far left. And I also want to thank Chief Mark Keel and all of the other members of the SLED team who have been instrumental in supporting our efforts. And we really appreciate you being here today, Lieutenant Roy. I would also like to thank the prosecutors, including those in my office who prosecute and seek justice for these victims. Standing up here with me today is Heather, and in the corner, Heather Weiss, our former interim solicitor here in this circuit, and she is a senior prosecutor in the office and a leader on this issue, working with Catherine Moorhead, who I'll talk about in a moment. But thank you, Heather. Kinley Abey, who cannot be with us today, is one of our prosecutors who really stands out, and there are so many other folks in our office on the prosecution side who do so much to help in that regard, and I just want to thank the staff of the Attorney General's office for all that you do. I would like to share with you now with our court statistics from 2020. In 2020, 10 different defendants were charged with 13 counts of human trafficking in South Carolina state courts. Overall, 8 charges of human trafficking were closed in state courts in 2020. As of this report, there are 75 human trafficking cases pending in South Carolina state courts. We continue to maintain national partnerships with the Department of Homeland Security's Blue Campaign, Thorn, Polaris, the Department of Health and Human Services through the Administration for Children and Families Region 4 Southeast Leadership Advisory Group. I'd hate to have the business card for that group, but this consists of 8 southeastern states. We are also a member of the National Compendium of State-Run Anti-Human Trafficking Initiatives, and Director Catherine Moorhead sits on this steering committee for this group along with 4 other state leaders. Catherine Moorhead is our Executive Director of our State Human Trafficking Task Force, standing to the left of the First Lady, Peggy McMaster, and I have to just give a special shout out to her. She really is tenacious and has been such a leader, not just in the state level in running the State Human Trafficking Task Force within the Attorney General's office, but even on the national level, and is a real go-getter. And she is my right arm, my left arm, right and left leg when it comes to fighting human trafficking. So Catherine, thank you so much. And this person cannot be here today, but Megan Rigabar, who is a program coordinator in this section, works right alongside Catherine. And if Catherine were standing up here talking right now, she would say that Megan Rigabar is her right arm, right leg, and brain, heart, lungs, everything. And so Megan, if you're out there on social media listening to this, thank you so much for all you've done during the pandemic. We appreciate your leadership and support of the task force in the AG's office. Our partnership with Polaris, who runs the National Human Trafficking Hotline, positions us to gather and release data each year. This data helps provide us with added insight into the trends within our state and best approaches to addressing the crime. So the Polaris National Human Trafficking Hotlines provided us with some following data that I'm now going to share with you. Since the last report, the top 5 counties, which comes from data gathered from Polaris, is National Hotline. The top 5 counties for people calling to report what they believe to be incidences of human trafficking. The top 5 counties are as follows: Horry, which is number 1, second year in a row; Charleston, Greenville, Richland, and Anderson. Dorchester fell off at number 5 last year, and Anderson replaced it. The other counties remain in the top 5. Now, it's important to know that sometimes when you look at statistics, in court statistics, or Polaris Project statistics, think of the hotline. If you look at a funnel, the hotline is everybody calling in if they suspect or see something that may in fact be human trafficking. And so everyone calls into the hotline, and as that information trickles down through the funnel, it goes to various agencies, including law enforcement agencies, and then investigations are done. Sometimes the tips at the hotline end up being human trafficking. Sometimes they might end up being some other crime that doesn't meet the elements of human trafficking, or it just might have been a tip that doesn't end up being human trafficking or any crime. It's just concerned citizens. I also want to make it abundantly clear that just because the 5 counties that I have listed in that order doesn't mean they're the 5 worst counties with human trafficking. These are counties where people are calling the hotline. It could be because there's more awareness. If you look at how our regions, remember the 9 regions that we talked about a moment ago? Those regions overlap in these counties. And so this could be evidence. I would suggest and submit to you that it is evidence that the regions are working in raising awareness and getting people to call hotlines and provide tips. Some more information from the hotline. There were 139 human trafficking cases reported in South Carolina since the last report. This is down from 156 from the previous report. The Polaris hotline identified 179 victims since the last report. Sometimes cases have more than 1 victim. The top 5 sex trafficking venues: illicit massage or spa businesses, hotel or motel-based businesses, residence-based sex businesses like a brothel as a way of example, pornography, getting people into pornography, that's another venue that is used, escort and delivery services. Again, these are all from the intake forms on the hotline data sheet. The top 5 labor trafficking venues: hospitality businesses, construction, traveling sales crews, agriculture, restaurant, food service. The top 5 trafficker relationships to victims: an employer relationship comes in at number 1, intimate partner, family member, a recruiter or people who recruit human trafficking victims, a drug dealer or illicit substance abuse provider. The top 5 methods of recruitment: it could be a job offer or an ad in the paper is the way that they initially engage the victim, a familial relationship, an intimate partner relationship, posing as a benefactor, false promise or fraud. Of course, abduction is there, coercion, smuggling-related cases. So these are some of the statistics and data from the human trafficking report that were kind of aggregated through the hotline. And again, sometimes the hotline data and law enforcement data don't marry up because, again, hotline is just taking tips. But I wanted to, if you want to know more about the statistics and do a deeper dive into the statistics, here is our 2020 human trafficking report. This report is, as you can see, it's pretty thick. You can download this at the website, which I will give you in just a moment, but this will provide you all of the details that you need to know everything there is to know about human trafficking since the last report. There is also an executive summary. If you don't want to read all of that, it's summarized nicely for you. So you can go to the website and find that report. As we have reflected on the data provided by the hotline as well as other sources noted in the report, we continue to see cases of both labor and sex trafficking, even through the pandemic. Under the AG's office leadership, the state task force will continue to bring light to the issue of sex trafficking in South Carolina with an increased focus on educating the public about labor trafficking. Human trafficking is a horrible, horrible blight on this state. Every year, we are becoming better at identifying and dealing with this heinous crime. More and more people are becoming aware. More and more people are becoming committed. More and more victims are being reached. With your help, we will bring more and more human traffickers to justice. This task force is committed to eradicating human trafficking in South Carolina. I would like to thank the members of the state task force, including law enforcement, prosecutors, medical service providers, direct service providers, victim advocates, and others working tirelessly to prevent the crime and meet the needs of victims and survivors in South Carolina. And I want to thank everyone standing up here with me today for your continued commitment and support. If you are interested in joining our task force or learning more, please go to our website at humantrafficking.scag.gov. That's humantrafficking.scag.gov. Again, thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to continuing to move forward in 2021 with vigorous efforts and renewed commitment to combat this horrible, heinous crime, and to continue working with all of you to make South Carolina a better place to live, work, and raise a family. I am happy to take questions on human trafficking. We'll make myself available to reporters after this press conference. If you want to talk to me about this issue or other issues, obviously I would encourage you to talk to some of these leaders up here and interview them on one-offs, so that you can get their perspectives and do a deeper dive on an interview with them. But any questions on human trafficking from our press corps at this time? I'll make myself available here.
One quick one. So just a few years ago, this was basically just an idea to have a human trafficking task force. I distinctly remember you to say that all you've known about was that it was like Taken, and that it ended up being much more than that, which you discovered. Given where you guys are now and where we have these resources, where do you see it going from here with the enforcement? I know you said you're looking forward to continuing to prosecute and be able to find these people. Where does it go here in South Carolina, especially given that it still seems to be kind of on the rise even in the wake of a pandemic?
Well, first off, I've heard the governor use this comment before. You can't manage a problem until you measure a problem. You've got to have data, you've got to have metrics, you've got to have a way to see trends so that you can go meet the problem at inflection points. In 2012, when the legislation was passed in the General Assembly, giving the Attorney General's office the authority to establish this task force and having those both mandated and unmandated members join. We started off with, I think, 11 or 14 members. Now 11. Now we have 450 who are voluntarily joining. And if you're interested in being a member of the task force, again, I would invite people watching me right now to call our office and ask to get involved. But the task force mission has always been to basically expose human trafficking, educate people on human trafficking, develop protocols, tactics, procedures for investigating and prosecuting and ultimately eradicating human trafficking. And obviously an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. So the task force every year has gotten better and has gotten bigger in its scope and how deep it dives and how it collects data. Like I said, when we started 8 years ago, there were no regional task force. Now there are 9 regional task force. There are 12 subcommittees. We are better plugged into national organizations, as I mentioned earlier. So the task force, this is not something, let me say this. This task force, I would love to be able to say here today, and I said in my remarks earlier, that I would like to eradicate human trafficking forever. Unfortunately, there are always going to be bad people out there. And so I don't see this task force going away. It's never going, it's kind of like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. By the time you get to the end of painting it, it's time to start painting it all over again. There's never an end result. This task force is going to be around for the foreseeable future, continuing to educate the public and do everything we can to keep people safe. And it's never going to arrive at a destination where we come here and say, all right, guys, we're folding the tent, we're going home, we've accomplished our mission. We're out here to let people know that if you're engaged in human trafficking, we're coming after you. If you're a victim or survivor of human trafficking, or you know someone who falls in that category, reach out to us because there's an army of people here to support you. I don't know if that directly addressed your question, but the task force has grown, it has raised awareness in this state, and has been very successful at doing those things. And so I'm very grateful to the task force and what it's accomplished over the last 8 going on 9 years now. Yes, sir. And that's a great question, John. I would say, Catherine, you may have an answer, but my knee-jerk response. Maybe I should let Catherine talk first before I give you my knee-jerk response, and then I'll give you my response.
We have a data and research subcommittee off the state task force, and we've been working very closely with state agencies and other partners. As Director Leach mentioned earlier, they've started a new data collection system. So we're trying to piece this all together and trying to get all of the state agencies to use the same data elements and create a more sophisticated data collection system. But I'll let Director Leach speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think identification is key to having the data that's accurate. And I think that's been a struggle for some time. That's been a struggle with DSS for a long time. I think we continue to be able to collect the data through our well-being teams, as far as understanding that the needs of the young person and trying to figure out, have they been trafficked, what's going on, and making sure that data is collected through our system. So I think we are on our way to be able to have accurate data that we can measure and figure out how we're going to put in the appropriate resources for that. But again, that's where that training, education, all that stuff comes in, because if we don't identify them, there isn't awareness, then you're right, we miss out on some folks, that young people.
The question was not in any way meant to be critical. It's
Yeah.
very subterranean kind of
No, it's hard to identify. The whole idea of this is to keep it, with trafficking, it's keep it secret. Nobody needs to know about it, and so it's hard to, as professionals, find out about those things. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think that one of the things we've identified through the task force is that we've been able to work together in the legislature and increase penalties for the traffickers and the sex sellers and buyers, and that where a lot of this trafficking's going on, and also identify the victims, where a lot of times victims were being not identified as victims. They were identified as being prostitutes, and they were actually being criminalized, where now we're seeing them more as victims, and that's where DSS has become more involved so they can get more help. So I think that's where a lot of this has come, to the top, and I think that's helped a lot of this. So I think that that's something very important that's come out of this task force.
Can I just add one thing? Please. Just Catherine's worked closely with us just on assessment tools and being able and asking the right questions on the front end, which is extremely important. And I think that's where you get more accurate data and the ability to address the needs appropriately, where in the past maybe we weren't so much. So, at DSS we've seen, Caucasian females between the ages of 15 and 18 are susceptible to this. And as young people are coming in the system or we're getting involved, we just have to make sure that we are asking all the relevant questions and assessing the situation appropriately.
Can I just make a quick comment?
Please,
about that,
please, absolutely.
Just a little follow-up question. As Director Leach mentioned, the significance and the question, I appreciate the question about data collection, because it is significant for us to be able to further strategize in our response across South Carolina. But I also think that it's important to note that we are lacking in victim services, formalized victim services, which positions everyone who's working with, whether it be children or adults who've been trafficked, makes it very difficult for us to respond. So by collecting data, such as what DSS is collecting and other agencies, we will be better positioned, hopefully, to entice those who are running programs in other states or who may be interested in creating more programs in South Carolina.
And John, going back to your question, if you could state it for me one more time, because I had a thought on it.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how much does your data reflect the overall extent of activity, sort of like races and underreported crime,
I think I'm understanding it. So what I was going to say earlier is that one of the benefits, and I said earlier, you can't manage a problem until you measure a problem, and it's kind of like how much crime is out there. That is a variable. That is like X. We don't know how much human trafficking there is. We can only compare it to trends based on previous year's data. And so, like I said earlier with those counties, the top 5 counties, that's the top 5 counties where people are sending in tips on a hotline. That doesn't necessarily mean those are the top 5 counties where human trafficking is occurring, although those are heavily metropolitan areas, those are heavy tourism areas. And so obviously that might be an attractive feature to someone who intends to be a trafficker. But again, we don't know, there are unknowns. That is a known unknown. We know that there's more of it out there. We just don't know how to quantify that variable. But we do know that each year we're able to see, based on reports and data, and whether it's court data or trafficking hotline data from tips, we're able to kind of traffic and monitor based on previous known variables, like the previous year's data and so on. So again, I know that there is more human trafficking going on out there. Just because a county wasn't in the top 5, in other words, whatever the 46th county is in ranking doesn't mean it's the 46th county in human trafficking activity. I would presume that that's just probably where there's less reporting going on, but the activity could certainly be, could be going on at much greater levels. So I just wanted to clarify that. I hope that added to your question. Are there any other questions? I know this has been a long press conference, but this is an important issue. We get one day a year that is formally National Human Trafficking Day. This is Human Trafficking Month. Every day should be Human Trafficking Day in the back of our minds as we move throughout our lives. But I want to make sure I've addressed all your questions.
Is it making an impact? Is it making an impact in making those perpetrators of these crimes stay away from South Carolina? Are you seeing an impact on all the efforts, all the different things going on, and the efforts of all these people?
Do you have any thoughts, or do you want me to? Let me invite. No, go ahead. I'll let you go, then I'll say something. Catherine Moorhead.
I do think that our efforts are making a large impact. I think more people have become aware of the crime. In South Carolina, we've partnered, as Attorney General Wilson mentioned, with the other 7 southeastern states. We communicate very closely with, I communicate very closely with my counterparts in these states as well as national leaders. And I do believe that we're bringing more awareness, and thanks in part to the media's help, and strategizing. We're learning as we go. It's growing. The Advisory Council will be critical in terms of guiding our efforts moving forward. We know that some of the vulnerabilities that people have been amplified as a result of the pandemic, that we do need help and we need guidance from those who are subject matter experts. So we're learning, and it is making an impact.
So, yes, I do believe we are getting better, and I do believe the task force is changing the narrative, or at least creating a narrative that didn't previously exist 8 years ago. And so I'm eternally grateful to the task force and its partner members for helping to do that. Any other questions? Again, I think some of my colleagues up here on the task force will make themselves available for, if you want to get off with them a one-on-one, I'll certainly do the same. But I want to thank our members of the media for being here. You are also, whether you realize it or no, whether you realize it or not, you are an unofficial member of the task force because you're our megaphone. You're the people out there talking about this work, helping us raise awareness and magnifying the issues out there so the general public knows about it. And I thank you very much for your support in that regard. So thank you all. I hope you all have a great day. This concludes the press conference. Thank you.